Everyone, good morning. I'm Tyrese Nicholas. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Family Access and Engagement. Happy first module of Child Care Financial Assistance Reform Training. I'm excited to get us started talking about the reform work. And today's topics are all going to be around principles of engagement. And principles of engagement is really how we engage as partners and how we engage as families. How do we engage with our families? And so today we're not talking about processes. We're not talking about policy, really. And we're not talking about procedures. We're going to be talking about all strategies for working with each other and for working with our families. And so I know many of you are excited to get right into. Tyrese, tell us what's changing for us. What does everything look like? Today, we're really sticking with the spirit of our work, which is really doing what we believe is right for families and bringing the family voice and the family experience into our work in child care financial assistance. And so we're going to do that by uplifting families, and we're uplifting them by starting with treating them with dignity and respect. And that starts with treating each other with dignity and respect as well. And so I welcome you. I'm going to start sharing my screen and get us started so that we can get you all timely. So who do we have in the room today? I'm not looking directly at the chat anymore, but I know we have folks here from Mass 211, our child care resource and referral agencies, our contracted providers, EEC staff. You'll see a lot of EEC staff with their backgrounds on. So hello to the EEC staff in the room. And then our partner agencies. So that's Department of Transitional Assistance, Department of Children and Families, and we probably have some folks here from Housing and Livable Communities. So welcome. Our learning objectives for today is one, to understand the direction, right? The direction of where we're going with the changes that we made in child care financial assistance. I opened up by saying we're bringing families into the work, the family voice, the family experience, and we're going to do that through a human-centered, family-focused, in a human-centered and family-focused way. We're going to talk about our roles, right? EEC's roles, your roles with coordination with our families across our programs and across the child care financial assistance. And then we're going to talk about how do we broaden our understanding, right? Our understanding around EEC's customer service approach. What does that look like? What do we expect? How do we expect for you to work with our families? And what does that look like around communication? And then we're going to move into understanding the roles for those of you who are family access administrators, those of you who are administering child care financial assistance, right? We're going to talk about what is your role in this new child care financial assistance system? What does engagement look like for our clients? And then we're going to close out excuse me, we're going to close out with understanding family engagement and the family engagement framework. So EEC works off of a framework, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to spend some time talking about what that framework looks like, what the principles of the framework are, and how we can do it, how you can do it in your different roles, and how it connects with our work. So we're talking about what's our principles of change. Our principle of change is to really move families into the right direction as they're navigating through our system. Our main principle of change is to focus on the families first. That's the people first and the process later. We've in the past, we focused highly on how do we move the family through enrollment, right? Through eligibility, enrollment, placement, reauthorization. We're starting with how do we bring the family first? How do we expand access for them? How do we make it simple and easy for them to navigate through the system? And how do we do that in an equitable way? Right. On this slide, you'll see quotes from our governor, our lieutenant governor, and the commissioner, Amy Kershaw of Department of Early Education and Care. I'm going to uplift her quote because it talks about thanking you as our partners. Right. We can't do any of this work without the community of people that are on this call today, on this training today, that help us administer child care financial assistance. Commissioner Kershaw says, I want to thank the Early Education and Care Board, our early education and care programs and partners, and our sister agencies who have worked collaboratively, intentionally with us to make changes that are centered around families' experiences and will bring greater equity and inclusion for children and families participating in our child care financial assistance. So we say thank you. We're starting by saying thank you for your help and helping us get to where we're at today, kicking off the spirit behind all of the changes. So I'm moving into just talking about, I'm going to talk pretty high level around why now and why the changes we're making and what they are, right? Just very high level. And so this slide talks about the who, what, when, where, why of the change for childcare financial assistance. I've already said the first one was families. We're moving to focusing on families, people first, and then the processes. What's behind that is the what. The what has been our regulations, our policies, our procedures. Our regulations are the foundation of our house. We've been talking about this process like we're building a house, we're renovating. When you renovate your house, you start by looking at your foundation and then you start looking at the cracks, right? Over the last 18 to 20 months, EEC has done a complete overhaul of the child care financial assistance system, looking at the entire system. So we have reformed our regulations, updated our policies, and we're moving into our procedural work. The what is engaging with all of you and our families and really modernizing and improving the system, right? And in that, we're hoping that we can increase economic mobility for families, right? For families that look like us, right? Increasing that and then providing greater equity. Equity means access for all, right? And so if they're for all of our eligible families, we want to ensure that they have access in our system and that they can move through a system that they can understand, and that many of you as our family access administrators or partners can help them navigate the least complicated system. The benefits that we gain is this increased access and flexibility, removal of all the burdens, right? All the paperwork, right? All the complexities in our administrative processes, right? When families are able to access the system, they're able to go back to work or to engage in education and training programs that really increases their family's trajectory, right? When parents do well, so do our children. And so how are we doing all of this? The how is we're kicking off our training session. We have a 5-module training and we're starting today. We're engaging with you as our stakeholders. We've held a number of internal and external working groups that we will continue to hold where we're engaging with you. The other how is that we're going to continue to change the way that we work with you. When I say we, EEC, how do we work with you? We're going to be creating a team to support this work, a team for our family, a regional team for our family access administrators, to have a person that they can pick up the phone and call as they're navigating this new system that will be less complex, but a little harder to learn, right? With transition, it takes time. And then we're going to set, like today, we're going to talk about some clear customer service expectations. Those are customer service expectations that start with what you should expect from EEC, right? When we're working with you, and then what EEC expects of you as you're working with our families. And all of this is starting, it already started. It's really started October 1 with the effective date of our regulations. And we see this as being a 12 to 18 month process, right? I think the biggest of all the changes that we've made is that we're making a culture shift change. We're making a change to the way that we work with families, the way that we work with each other, and how we navigate through it all. And so with any change, it takes time. And so we like to say, or we've been saying over the last couple of months, is that this road may be a little lumpy and bumpy, but we're on it with you and we're on it together. And what I will say, what's the most important in this process is recognizing that what we're doing it for families focused around 3 main goals. And those goals are to prioritize the family's needs and their experience, increase their overall system efficiency, meaning like we're going to move them through the system better, right? It's going to look a little bit different. That looking a little bit different is the modernizing and updating our system, removing away from all of the heavy paper processes and moving towards digital applications, right? Text messaging of families. What this looks like is making sure that families know what to expect in the system, know what resources and supports are available for them and their children, and then they're able to access it easier and faster as they're navigating. Our guiding principles in this work, and you'll hear me talk a lot, you'll hear us talk a lot throughout the training modules around these principles, right? That are all focused on the way that families are navigating and experiencing us. So we're alleviating burdens for families by streamlining and reducing duplication of forms and verifications. We're streamlining and clarifying roles and responsibilities for our family access administrators. We're shifting the burden. Right? We want to make sure that things are easier for the family. So we're shifting the burden away from our families. We're improving the communication. We're increasing the expectations around communicating with families. In this world that we're in now, we do a lot of communicating via text message and email, and our families should be able to experience that as well. And we're extending timelines, right? Timelines, we want to ensure that there's stability of care for families and that families have the time when life is happening to get in different documents so that they can continue to receive their assistance. And the 2 last ones are focused around inclusive access to language, right? Our families should be able to communicate with us in their native language. EEC is moving to communicating with families in up to 14 languages, right? In order for families to feel like they're included and to feel like they're important, they have to be able to communicate with this in a language that is comfortable and normal for them, right? And normal for them. So we recognize that, and we're working on making sure that our language, that the language access is available, but also that what we're writing is clear, simple, and concise, not just for our families, but for you. And then the last one is of extreme importance. It's building stronger local and regional partnerships, right? And that's the work that we do together. That's that cold case management that all of you are already currently doing as you're moving the families around the system, as you're moving them along. What we're doing is we're laying out the guardrails, do the changes to our regulations, our policies, and our procedures. We're giving you the guardrails and the framework for you to be able to do it and to move families simpler through the system in a way that they understand, in the way that they understand. All right, so now I'm going to engage with you. I think we're up to 193 people. So 193 people makes it kind of hard for me to be able to see all the faces, but I'm going to try my best to scroll across the screen, see your faces, and I want to hear your voices. I want to hear your voices. And so I'm going to switch a little bit. How do we engage as partners? Not with the families yet, but how do we engage with each other, right? what does EEC expect, or what can you expect from EEC? We see principles of engaging with partners as these 5 principles here. I could like to call them, these are my 5 core principles in the way that I engage with people. Whether it's in my professional career or in my personal life, I'm going to meet people where they are. I'm going to be respectful, and then I'm going to build a rapport and trust. When you build relationships with people as you get to know them, right, it's easier to navigate through work. And then I'm going to extend, or we are going to extend, unconditional positive regard. And my last one is my favorite, which is giving grace with accountability. So we're asking for these things and engaging with us, right? And engaging with each other as you're engaging with each other. 5 core principles. 5 core principles. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to go I'm going to ask you guys a question. I'm going to ask the question, which is, how do we extend unconditional positive regard to each other? To each other. I'm going to say, how do we do that? You can raise your hand. You can use the chat. I would love a couple of brave souls to come off mute and tell me, how do we extend positive regard? Or do folks know what I mean when we say unconditional positive regard? I see a head nod no. Do we know what it means? Do folks know? Any brave souls? I can't see the chat. So team, help me out.
Good communication. One person who said good communication. Yep. Compliments.
Almost. So extending positive regard means assuming the best. Assuming the best from each other, right? Assuming the best. It means putting your own thoughts and feelings, right, to the side and just focusing on the work or the person, right? Not thinking of like, I'm going to assume that you have all the best intentions here, right? It's assuming the best. It's removing how you feel from a situation. And I know that's hard, right? I know that's hard working with us, and that's hard sometimes as we're co-case managing families through transitions, but that's what it means. That's what it means. That's what it means. So engaging as partners in practice, I'm going to start sharing again, really starts with these four things. It's assuming the best in complicated situations, asking questions versus making statements, being mindful of the tone in emails, and picking up the phone to reach out. Does all of this make sense for folks, right? Does it make sense for you? No voices? I'm gonna give it a pause, right? Because we're talking about engaging with partners. I'm feeling kind of lonely out here. I'm feeling lonely out here in this virtual space.
Tyrese, you're getting some yeses in the chat.
Yes, it makes sense. So I need 2 people to tell me, how do you engage? What does it look like for you as you are navigating as partners with your partners, whether you're working with the Child Care Resource and Referral Agency, whether you're working, someone's trying to get in, whether you're working with a Child Care Resource and Referral Agency or a contracted provider or a partner agency, what does it look like? Brave souls.
We always try to be respectful, and always try to ask questions so we can understand what's going on, because sometimes something might be taking a while, not because of that person's fault, but because of a process. So we always need to be mindful of what people are doing.
Yeah. So I'm going to lift up something you said. You said sometimes it's a process, it's not the person. Do you know what that is called? unconditional positive regard. Like that's what it is in practice. Like I'm not assuming anything other, because sometimes it's the process. It is
Yeah.
not the person. What's your name?
Elsie Mara.
ALC, nice to meet you. Where are you joining us from?
The childcare resources in Worcester.
Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you too.
Yeah. Anyone else? What does it look like?
Good morning. Hello,
Good
can you hear me?
morning. Yes, good morning.
Well, good morning. So here, as family access administrators, we all have a role, whether it's the provider side or family engagement side. And through our communication with clients or even providers, we have to be mindful that if we don't understand something, we just look over our policies, we partner, we resources. We are the first person the client comes in contact with. So we want to build a great rapport. Not only that, we don't want to leave a client without having unlimited amount of resources available to them, because we're the blueprint of the company, right? We start from the foundation and we build up. So we try to engage with the client, try to assess the family's needs, and through those needs, you're learning a lot about the family demographics, and you're able to identify what are the needs of this family. Is it just childcare, or do they need something else? And that gives you an opportunity in a window period to go ahead and provide these resources and also services to the families, and in the mindful of your job as well.
So Dominga, and I'm gonna push you a little bit, so I'm gonna apologize in advance if it makes you uncomfortable. So what does that look like when you're trying to connect a family to a resource with another partner? How do you do that?
So
Or what if it's E? What if I'm getting in your way? What if you're waiting and I'm saying I, right? So EEC subsidy management, we're getting in the way. You're waiting for us. What does that look like? How do you engage with me? Take the family out. How do you engage with me and helping that family?
well, with our partners, I believe, like, I also believe in the ladder of command, right? It starts with us, and if I'm in a situation where I'm waiting for a response from EEC and the client is very, they need the services and they need it immediate. Like, say for instance, just homeless families. We're dealing with a lot of very, very sensitive things right now in our
Yeah,
world, in our nation, and in our
absolutely.
city, and we're serving the neediest of the neediest. I believe if there's something that's happening and it's conflicting with what I need to get done for the client, I go to my subordinates and seek assistance, and then from there it can, grow to the next step, because we all have a chain of command and we have to like, but there's a communication, right? There's a fluid communication, professionalism. We're exchanging emails. We're also exchanging information that it's vital and crucial to the family that we're serving, and also to the need of that client and that case itself. And that way we're able to all collectively, as partners, work with each other to make sure our client gets the best services and the rapid response that they need.
Yeah, so about being responsive and listening. What I hope is that you'll know, like if you had to pick up the phone, you'd know who you could actually call. That's partly what EC, that's one of our big commitments, is that we want to ensure that when you need to engage with us, that you can engage with us to move a family along in the process. Before I move on with my last slide, anyone else? Okay, you guys are gonna push me to say the hard stuff. Anyone else?
Can I just, 1 second? I just want to say that having a strong relationship with your CCR&Rs is very important.
Yeah.
I have bounced a lot of stuff off of them. Even though I've been here quite a while. There's always those little things that fall through the cracks and you just don't remember. And no matter how you try to look it up, you just can't find it. So the CCR&R that I deal with, I just want to give a shout out to them that they are extremely helpful when I give them a call, and they 99% of the time answer the phone. And I do appreciate that. or they'll definitely reach out back to me. So I think we do need to all work together to help as many people as we need.
Yeah, I love that. You said your local CCR&R. You know who, it sounds like you know who to call, right?
I do.
So you're
Speed
picking
dial.
up the phone because you've learned like picking up that phone sometimes is the difference versus sending that email.
Yep, it
Okay.
definitely helps.
Thank you. And which CCR&R do you work for? Do you work with?
Lawrence.
Lawrence. So shout out to childcare. Shout out to Lawrence Child Care Network. Thank you. All right, thank you. I'm gonna move on. So what's EEC's commitment to you as in this work? So we are committed to being your partner, right? We're committed to being your partner. You'll hear throughout our training series a lot around partnership and collaboration in addition to a family and human-centered framework. But we believe in partnering with you because you're our partners in family and provider engagement. We're moving to meeting with you regularly. For our childcare resource and referral agencies, we have a regular cadence of meeting with with them, but we want to make sure that we have a cadence and meeting with all of our family access administrators, all of them. So we're moving to setting up some regular cadence to be able to do that, to really support the work that we're asking of you. We believe in proactive partnership. It's going to take proactive partnership. That means being ahead of it, being able to actively work on building those relationships, right? Meeting each other where we're at, building those relationships, giving some grace with accountability, and always assuming the best as we're trying to implement these new policies and procedures. And then we're going to train you and give you technical assistance. EEC is not going to ask you to do something without providing the resources and the support for you to be able to do the work. So I say thank you, and we're going to do a quick learning check. So I'm going to push on you a little more and ask one question. I just have one question for folks, and you can use the chat with your responses. And now, what are some of the core principles in meaningful engagement as partners, right? Like, what are some of the core principles?
Yes. No, did she come?
Right. What are some other core principles engaging with each other? You can use the chat, or if we have anyone who wants to come off mute, please do. Wow, I'm gonna say it's Friday, and this is why folks are quiet. I think you're a quietest bunch. All right, listen, empathy, honesty, yes. Positivity, trust, love. I know my colleague here will love that one, love, absolutely. Patience, understanding, kindness, compassion, accountability, ownership. Absolutely. What is key to remember is that as we're engaging with each other as partners, we're people first. Right? We're people first. We all come into this work. We came into this work with a why. We all had a why for why they do it, for why we've come into this work. I am a mom, right? I joined EEC, and I am 4 days shy of my year anniversary, right? And my why has always been that I believe in serving, right? Whether it's in my personal or my professional, but I believe in helping families navigate, right? When you're a resource, it makes it easier for families to navigate. I shared yesterday in a training, and I'm going to share briefly here before turning things over to my colleague Bethany, but I'm a mom. So I have worked in human services for 23 years in a number of different roles. I've worked at Department of Transitional Assistance, Department of Children and Families, and I'm a couple of other agencies, but I'm a mom first. And I was sharing, like, my children are 22 and 12. my experience with childcare when I was 22 was very different. When I was 23 with my daughter, it was very different than what it was when with my son who was 12. But can anyone guess if I ever, and you can use the hand feature of the chat, can anyone guess if I ever accessed childcare, financial assistance, or even the childcare system? Can anyone guess? You can do a head nod, yes. Yeah, in the chat, it's a yes. Yes, no, yes. Yeah, so it was a no, right? It was a no. So I was 23, working in my career, like I thought I had a pretty decent job, right? I was married, right? I thought I had a pretty decent job. And we were a two-parent household, but I never accessed childcare. I probably was eligible for childcare financial assistance, and I didn't do it because I heard it was complicated and it was crazy, right? And I just didn't even want to be bothered. And so what it equated to is like, we've made a decision, my daughter's dad and I, to just care for her ourselves, right? In a state where we had no help. It was just the two of us. I worked during the day. He switched jobs to care for her, and he worked in the evening. But guess what? That equated to our daughter having social anxiety, right? And so I would go work out at the gym, and I saw a card on the community board, and on that card was a name that was familiar to me. Her name was Kamisha Jefferson. I will never forget that name, right? And I said, Kamisha, is this you? She was one of the childcare workers in my gym, and the only one that my daughter connected with. I said, our daughter needs something. She needed something. And so that was my first way of coming into a formalized childcare setting for my daughter, but it was because she needed it for her development. And I want to highlight that, right? And focus, like I had the executive level functioning to be able to navigate outside of a system, but I felt with the knowledge I had, it was complicated. So I say all this to say, like, imagine how our families feel, right? And many of our families are going by word of mouth, right? And community. And so they're accessing either someone in their family, right? Or someone, they may have an experience like me or not. And I lift that up to say, like, we are people first with our own experiences as we're navigating. And we have to remember the biggest shift we're making in the change is that I want that mom who's 23, who may look like me or not, or whose experiences may have been like mine, to at least want to be able to hear that it's not complicated to navigate the system, and to hear that the partners, the people that she's going to work that look like you and me, right? We've made it easier for them to navigate. So I'm going to shift over to Bethany. I'm turning it over to you. To talk about what EEC's customer service approach is. Bethany?
Well, thank you so much, Tyrese, for setting that important foundation as we're continuing to have this discussion about childcare financial assistance and the expectations for customer service in a human-centered kind of way through EEC, the department. And Tyrese, we cannot see the screen yet, but while it's coming up, my first question for you all, and I'm going to ask you to use your chat, and I'm jumping right in, but good customer service would be for me to tell you a little bit about myself first. So I am Bethany Glass. I'm the Director of Childcare Financial Assistance at EEC, and some of you may know me from my previous role. I've only been with EEC for 5 months now, but prior to that, I worked for DCF for the past 10 years. Prior to that, I worked for Early Head Start that had a family child care and home visiting component. And before that, I worked in out of school time where I was an assistant group leader in college all the way up to a center director at an after-school program in the South Shore. So I've been in your role, and I know the important work that you are doing. And a lot of what I'm going to say to you now are things that you're already doing. They're things that you already know, but they're good reminders for us. And it's good to have EEC now giving permission or saying that this is how we expect for you to interact with families. So I'm going to ask you to go to the chat. And my question for you is going to be, what does customer service mean to you? And I see folks already putting it in the chat. I want you to think about when you've been in the store, when you've been at the doctor's appointment. And Tyrese, you want to come back to the screen? Here we go. When you've been at a gas station, anywhere you've been, does customer service look like for you? And what does it mean to you? There we go. So I see folks saying giving feedback, respecting, listening, being accessible to families, listening, understanding, kind, genuine, answering the phone. And speaking of phones, let's add in, what about when you were on the phone? What does customer service look like for you? Providing information and services, being in a respectful manner, practicing good listening, being helpful, going the extra mile, making clients feel good about getting services, understanding problems and finding solutions, and yes, understanding quick questions, friendly, all of these things. Thank you. And I will pull back on, I know there's 50 more messages. So thank you so much for this feedback, because you know what it means in your personal life. And how do we make sure that we bring that in to your role when you're working with the family in your child's care program, but also when you're working with a CCRNR, when you're working with Mass 211, or when you're working with a program, and when you're working with EEC, what are the expectations? So everything that I'm going to say to you, these are going to be the things that you should expect from us as well, and that you should exemplify in the community. So when we get to EEC's customer service expectations, it's all of the things that you said, being kind and courteous and professional when you're talking to families, listening to families about their needs and concerns. And just going back to my program days, I know that some families, once they trust you, you learn a lot about them. They talk a lot. I've had some parents who would talk to me for an hour if I let them while I'm running a program, right? But they build that connection to you in the community. You are a resource to them, and you learn a lot about them. And we know the children definitely talk a lot as well. So getting to know that family and listening to them and identifying their needs and concerns, and then doing everything in your power to be efficient and accurate as we are trying to serve each eligible family. So while we are doing this, one of the important things that I just want to ground us in is that the importance of your role as you're making sure that families are having access to this critical program. We know that research tells us that with brain development, that early education and care is a critical intervention. We know for out of school time too, that after school time, that critical hours of when a child might get into so many at-risk activities, that having a program, having access to a program can change the trajectory of the rest of that child's life, which impacts them from generation to generation. So the work you're doing is important, and we want to make sure, and I know you do this already, making sure that families get access to this, right? So in practice, what does it look like? And throughout our presentations, we've had a lot of feedback about that. And I want to get to some of the simple things that sometimes we forget, like a greeting, like your tone. So how you sort of frame your conversation and relationship, not just in your verbal communication, but let's even take it to emails. We had some great examples of folks and how they frame their emails. And this is one of the CCRNRs that say, I say good morning. I end it with a salutation as well to sort of frame it. So sometimes what's in the middle of that, right? I might have to be saying something to a provider, saying something to a parent, but how I frame that conversation, it allows for me to be able to represent my tone, that we are partnering in this work. I'm building rapport with you to let you know I am a support to you. I am a friend to you. I am here to help. And we're so glad to hear how you're already partnering. And in that example that I believe Pam said about the CCRNR and having them on speed dial, that's exactly what we want, right? And with our families too, doing the same thing. So one of the important things, and I think it might have come up in the chat, is getting back to somebody. If you don't have an answer, following up or finding one out, and then making sure you get back to them with that answer or directing them to the person with the answer. Asking open-ended questions. Sometimes we may approach a family and feel like we already know, but how do we ask open-ended questions to allow them to open up and share with us maybe something. Sometimes in those conversations, you may find out that a family might be eligible for something else. And then allowing client feedback. And I want to challenge you to think about all levels of your organization, from somebody who might be answering to the phone all the way up to folks in senior roles. When a parent calls you, when a CCRNR calls you, when Mass 211 calls you, when EEC calls you, and we're giving some feedback, how do I receive this in a positive way and use it to incorporate it into my practice and address it within my organization? One of the things that we talked about, and Tyrese mentioned it, about the speech that we use. There's a lot of EEC speak. And I know when I was at DCF, I learned it so that I could share it with providers when there were certain things that might be happening where I could say, well, this is what EEC says. One thing that we want to do is make sure that you as providers, as CCRNRs, and especially for our families, that they understand what you're talking about. An example, as Tyrese was sharing about her childcare experience, me, when I was in college and needed a voucher for my child, I didn't understand what provisional childcare was. I don't know that I received it, but just using this as an example to say, it's 12 more weeks of childcare while you're seeking an activity. Simplifying it instead of provisional. Sometimes even the things that we use and we think everybody understands, a voucher and a slot, that's a big source of confusion for families. What does this mean? How can we explain it to families in a way that they understand, and we make sure that we confirm their understanding, and we do it with respect, consistency, in a timely kind of way, dignified with respect, right? Positively and being responsive, and then building the community partnership. One thing that I know in working with programs is a lot of children who would grow up in my after school program would come back and work for the program. A lot of families stay with you after they may no longer be eligible for child care financial assistance. So you're building a bond and a relationship there. And with the CCRNRs and Mass 211 as well, how do we continue that? And how do we grow that? Tyrese, next slide. All right, so when we're thinking about how do we do this, what do our families need from us? We need to understand their needs, right? We need to understand their needs. They need to be listened to. And one of the big shifts that you're going to see with our procedures and policies coming, the available options. Families should know all of the options available to them on the front end so that you can help them determine their best path to child care financial assistance. Doing that on the front end, and we're going to help you to do that by bringing to light all of the eligible services and resources in the community on the front end for you, so that when you're working with a family, you have it there. And a family is able to self-identify and say, well, you know what, I'm homeless, or I have this situation going on, and you're able to determine what is happening for them and help them to find solutions to some of the problems that they might have. Now, sometimes we know that a family might not be eligible for childcare. We were hearing this, that families are right above the income guidelines and they're not eligible. We want to equip you with resources so that you may guide them into the community, whether through scholarships or other resources like a Head Start, like a home visiting, like play groups, so that you're able to find solutions and continue to work with them or support them or guide them to somebody who might be able to help, even if it's the public schools, right? So making sure that we equip you with how to help families out when they're in any situation so that you're able to find solutions to problems. We want efficiency, you being proactive and being caring and warm in your responses and making them feel important. We want to make sure that they feel important. And one thing that I just saw in the chat, and I'm gonna just incorporate in there, is that everyone, Mass 201, CCRNRs, providers, EEC, we're all going to be on the same page, right? We should be operating in the same kind of way, in the same kind of spirit to help a family when they're in need and when they're seeking care. So they shouldn't have different experiences with each one of these partners as they're navigating. That's something we're going to work towards, knowing that parents are so important, and that how we interact with parents, if we could support parents, that then they could support their child, and they are the most important person in their child's life. So making sure that we make them feel like that. And one of the things that we talked about is transparency. We're being very transparent with you to say, you are partnering with us to help us build this. And as we're going, we're building it together. And there may be some things that we haven't quite figured out. And we're saying this on the front end. And we want to do that with you. And it's okay to do that with your families as well. And for you to do that with us, expecting that we'll support you along the way. All of those things. Thank you, Tyrese. We could move on to the next one. Now, I know that many programs, you're already doing this, and we might have some, definitely some change leaders out there that are doing this work, and they have been doing it, and there might be some folks who need some support with that. So we know you're in different spaces. What I want to ground us in, though, with this customer service is understanding cultural competence. Some people say cultural humility as well. How do you approach this work in a way that is going to be respectful of people's culture, their background, their family, who they are? And that starts with these key concepts, is valuing our differences. And I would urge us, we need to approach this topic, approach each family as a learner. I want to learn from you. So with the valuing of the difference, how do I understand how a client defines their family? We're saying that if a family tells you that this is my family, this is who makes up my household, it could be a single mother or a single father, it's me and my children, or whatever their family system is, that we take them for their word, that this is who their family is. That's in our conversation. That's how they document in their applications, to honor that this is their family. And we don't have to go searching for others who we might think are part of their family. We want to lead with just honoring what a family is saying that they are and who they are, right? In addition to that, that's going to take you being self-aware of the own things that you bring to the table, your own experiences and how you think, your own cultural background. So me as a woman of color, a Haitian woman, I cannot approach a family. And sometimes you may think, if you're sitting with a family who has a shared culture or shared background for you, we cannot assume that we understand, because every family is different. They have different traditions, different things that influence them as their childhood, their systems up. There's a lot of different things. How do I make sure that I'm checking myself when I'm sitting with a family to allow for them to tell me about their experience, about their culture? And then being aware as well of underlying feelings or stereotypes that can influence how you work. A lot of our families have trauma in their background. They might be involved in systems, and even talking to you might trigger them, right? That I'm in this situation that I need to present information or explain something, and I don't even know how to navigate it myself. I don't know why I'm talking to you, Mass 211. I want this program who's right here down the street. Why do I need to go through you? And then I have to go to the CCRNR, or I have to talk to this program. I don't know all these things. And coming in and talking to a person who might have some judgments about my situation, we want to make sure that when we're approaching families that we're doing it in a way that takes ourselves out of it and allows them to just tell us about who they are and how we could help them. And then we want to make sure that we have resources for them, resources that are responsive and responsive to the different cultural groups. So one thing that Tyrese mentioned is making sure that we have 14 languages where material is translated. We also want to think about special accommodations. You're going to see that a lot throughout the new documentation to make sure we're thinking on all levels of a family's journey and development. And then we also want to make sure that we are really being thoughtful in even your hiring, right? We were hearing about the influx of migrants into our state, and we know that many agencies are hiring. You're looking for staff that speak the language of your community. You are doing a lot of different things, whether it's translation services, and you're making things work. And that's being responsive. It goes past just putting up those pictures in a classroom that show families that look different. It goes to putting it into practice. Next slide, please. So as we sort of ground and finish up this piece, just reiterating some of the necessary skills that you are going to need to provide this type of exceptional service. It's going to be that empathy, being able to listen and understand a family's experience. It's going to be your own communication skills, being mindful of your language and how you speak, and speaking in positive regard, assuming the best. It's going to be your listening skills. How do you listen to what a family is really saying? Sometimes even when they're not saying it, how do you listen? And that might be meeting with somebody in person, right? We lose a lot over emails and phone calls, and being able to accommodate a family to sit across from them and listen. I would also encourage, when you're meeting with your staff, when some of what Tyrese talked about, again, like just these different levels of communication and listening with body language and those kind of things, those are ways that we're going to build these relationships that we want to see among us and among our family. And then patience. You're going to have to be patient with us. We're going to be patient with you. You be patient with your partners, the CCRNR, Mass 211, be patient with our families, and just expressing this grace with accountability in all of this is going to be so important. And then for you, one thing that we are committed to do is increasing the knowledge of services that are available. We know that there's some services, whether it's one-on-ones or early childhood mental health grantees or Head Start or whatever. There's a lot of services out there that families might be eligible for that you are not aware of. We want to make sure that we give you the resources and that we could do it in the future on a regional level, so that when you're sitting with a family, and even for your own program, consultation and support, that you understand what's available to you. So those are the things that I really wanted to highlight for you. And then I'm going to close on this one about going the extra mile. one of the things we've heard a lot of great examples of going the extra mile, and I know you do it every day when you are linking a family to resources in the community, but also, you know, I know our CCRNR did a 3-way with a provider and a family to help navigate that family. That's going the extra mile. I know there's some programs that do birthday cakes for DCF foster children. That's going the extra mile. Winter coats, all the other things that you're doing, turkey drives, those are things that are going the extra mile. So we want to encourage you to keep on going the extra mile and doing that great work that you're doing, and we will be there with you along the way. So in this, Tyrese, I'm going to close, and I want to thank everybody for your activity in the chat and just validating and letting us know that you are partnering with us on all of these things. So thank you, appreciate you. Back to you, Tyrese.
Thanks, Bethany. So there was a question in the chat or that I just want to lift up before we take a break, right? In the chat, the question is like, how can we ensure that all partners are on the same page with this approach? I'm going to push that question back to the audience, right? How can we ensure all partners are on the same page? And when I say we, how can EEC? What are your thoughts on this question?
By communicating, by sharing information, that way we are aware of everything that is going on.
What else? What else? Kelly, do you want to come off mute? What are your thoughts here?
Tyrese, you have some in the chat too. Well, Kelly might be getting
trainings as a form of keeping in touch, regular trainings, absolutely, right? So like my immediate response was to this is we do stuff like this. We start having the conversation. This is the how we do it. We have courageous conversations and we talk about it. Right? How do we ensure? We ensure by making sure people are informed about the processes. Part of the question gave an example, and it said Mass 211 told a family that desperately needs childcare for an infant that they're working on applications from 2021. Mass 211 doesn't work on applications. Mass 211 does not process applications.
So Tyrese, I'm off mute. Sorry, I'm on my phone.
Hi, Kelly.
So
how are you?
it's a lot worse. But how do we reconcile comments like that? Because those are the comments that get a lot of traction and are shared with everybody. So, you know, I think it's interesting to hear, like, why are people not accessing these resources and services? It's because I think there's a lot of misinformation and miscommunication, and I just don't know how to counter that from our perspective. You know?
Yeah, so that's why like we're here today. So I'm sharing with you. This is why I started with how do we engage with partners, right? And I don't remember who it was, but one of our courageous folks got off and said, I use my CCRNR as a resource, right? It's the sharing of information, right? We have to share information and we have to ensure like when there are trainings that we're showing up, right? And I'm going to say we a lot because we see ourselves, EEC sees ourselves as partners with many of you. So it's Kelly, you might be saying like whoever said that, say, you know, Mass 211, they're actually, their primary role in partnering with EEC is waitlist management. They add families to the waitlist. The only way they know a status is if something has been done on a CCRNR side or by a family access administrator. They do not process applications. They might review them to see if they're complete, but they don't process them. They're actually not, they're like a support, like a family calls and says, hey, can you know, where am I at? Am I still active? They're gonna say yes, and then they're gonna reach out to the CCRNR. Or you have a family saying, I'm looking for childcare. Can you tell me what's available in my area? And they would give some resources. And so a lot of what we'll be doing through these modules are talking about what are people's roles and responsibilities within this system, right? Who's responsible for what? Because there is a lot of confusion. And then what happens are people are frustrated. And sometimes I'm going to say we as partners are frustrated before the families get frustrated. We get frustrated, right? And so it's like, oh, you're saying 2021, but you have to know how the wait list works to understand what that means, right? Because if you hear that, you're like, we're in 2023, right? And there are people who believe that the wait list is like a placement list. It's not, right? And if you're on the wait list, it doesn't mean you're eligible. And so there's a number of things that we have to ensure that we have the information and the knowledge about it so that we can dispel the myths, right? And the challenges and the questions so that they don't continue to move on, continue to fluster and go. And I'm glad you brought this up because this is why it's so important for us to be able to build relationships with each other as partners so that we can navigate the system, so that we can better support people, right? And one of the things we've been saying a lot over the course of training this week is the importance of moving away from our emails and picking up the phone and talking to each other. Sometimes it's a lot easier to talk about what you heard or what's coming up, right? Versus then responding in the email.
And Terry,
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Bethany,
Yeah.
to your point though, like creating really a family-friendly landing place for people to understand, because again, we often talk in jargon, we use a lot of acronyms, and we make a lot of assumptions about what people know about the system. If I have a new baby, I don't know anything, and I'm going to rely on somebody to share and help me walk through that journey, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to take us some time, right? Like we're rebuilding a house. How long does it take to renovate a whole house?
Yeah. And
right?
we probably talked about this too at the end, Tyrese, but a lot of folks in the chat are talking about a resource page on mass.gov. Can there be something, this landing space, not only for families, but for providers to just be a hub of information? And we could share maybe some of the work that we're doing in that space about this.
Absolutely. And, part of the work, we're starting with, our regulations, policies, and procedures, and we are updating our website, right? So that there will eventually be a space for families to land and for providers and people who just families, regardless if you're interested in childcare financial assistance or not. There are some families who just are like, I'm pregnant. What happens next, right? Like what happens when I have my baby and I'm looking to go back to work? What's available to me? Yes, training on waitlist, vouchers, flex pool would be great. Guess what? It's coming next week. The family journey training is waitlist, eligibility, enrollment, placement. It is all of that, right? It is all of that. So that is the second module of the training. We're a little behind schedule. So we're going to give you, we're still going to give you a break. It's Friday morning. We're going to give you a 5-minute break. And then, so it's 10:13, come back at 10:18, stand up, stretch, take a deep breath, take a minute, and then come back and we're gonna turn it over. And Hajai and his team are just gonna kick it off. Hajai works in our family and community supports team. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Tyrese, Bethany, everybody. My name is Hajai Scherer, and I'm excited to be here. We're going to follow up that customer service aspect of the training that we went through this morning, and my colleague Flo House and I are going to talk about the family engagement framework as being a best practice that we believe in, that we practice, and that we want to elevate here at EEC. So that's pretty much what I just said in goal number 1. So goal number 2, I want to let you know that this actually exists as a foundational document within EEC that's been around for almost a decade, this family engagement framework. And we're going to take this opportunity over the next months and years to really lift this up. Flo, who you'll hear from in a minute, and I work very closely with the Coordinated Family Community Engagement Network that's been using the family engagement framework as a method to work with families. And we are really thrilled to be here today, sharing it with more of the EEC family and network so that we all have access to this really powerful tool. And what we want you to walk away from, oh, sorry, you're not seeing my slides now? Okay, let me go back up and thank you for that help, team.
I see your slides, Sajai.
Oh, sorry, maybe I'm having it on the wrong presenting mode. Let me just make sure.
Okay.
For the recording, there we go.
All right, there's so many things to do in a Zoom room. So so the third goal that we wanted to talk with you today, or just make sure that you leave with, is this idea that the framework is a way to help you build authentic relationships with families that contribute to the healthy development of children. So Bethany lifted that up, and I just want to keep going back to that again and again and again. And if we don't mention it every 5 minutes, know that it's the water that we swim in the Department of Early Education and Care, that these 3 to 5 or 6 magical years at the beginning of a child's life really sets the foundation for everything that comes later. So we don't want to, ignore children in elementary school or middle school or high school, or we don't want to not work with adults. In fact, many of the families that we're working with now, many of the parents are in fact adults who may not have got as much love, attention, education, compassion, care that they might have received in their early years, and it may make it hard for them to parent a little bit. So we are looking to help intergenerationally minimize trauma and hardship. And that really starts with us thinking about young children and families and all the people around them that care for them, and how we can help lift up the whole network of folks that are caring for young children in our communities. So I'm gonna ask you all a question. You can see we're trying to make this a back and forth so that we can engage and have, healthy conversations and healthier relationships. And, in the early childhood space, we talk about serve and return, that, in order for a child to learn best, adult that loves them has to give them some bit of, energy, some bit of, something to kind of feed on, and then the child comes back with some energy. And that back and forth is a constant throughout the life of a child. So my offer to you is this question: what does family engagement mean? So Bethany had asked you, what does customer service mean? And there were some really great responses to that. You may be able to simply reprieve your answer to what is good customer service, because some of the answers were the same. So I'm going to give everybody a couple minutes to think about that. Again, you can copy and paste some of those answers from good customer service. But let's see what people come up with around family engagement. What does that mean to you? Because it is a little bit different, and there are people who are representing different roles here in the training today. One of the ideas that I saw earlier, okay, so we've got empowering and encouraging our families by being a resource and a guide for them. Yes, thank you, Rachel. So that holds a lot. Family-centered experience, partnership with families. You can keep them coming. Those 3 initial ideas that came into chat, those are all absolutely correct. and the foundation of what we're going to be talking about over the next hour or so. Good two-way communication, listening, talking, listening, sharing, all the serve and return that we kind of alluded to. One of the ideas from good customer service that I wrote down that really stuck with me was make them feel important. And you do that, you make them feel important by doing these things you're talking about, connecting with families, hearing parents' voice, appreciating the work that they do for their, with their children, for the community. And I want to also thank you, each of you in the room, all, 197, almost 200 people here today who are all working in this field of early childhood education, helping to support families, investing in communities, being supportive. So those are all great ideas that will keep going with these as we talk about family engagement, not just today, but over the many months and years that we're going to be doing this work. Before I turn it over to Flo, though, I'd like to say that I've been at EEC. I've been a social worker for 30 years. I've been a son and a brother and a father and a husband and a community member. There's a lot that I do as a social worker for 30 years in Boston and greater Boston, Massachusetts. I'm really happy to be at EEC at this moment because it feels like there's this, zeitgeist around family engagement and customer service. There's a change in the air where we at EEC are working with all the partners who are in the room so that all of us can work with families in a way that lifts up these core concepts that we're going to dive into. So Flo, I'm going to pass it along to you so you can tell them about this great resource that's available.
Awesome. Thank you, Hajai. Good morning, everyone. I'm Flo Howes, and I'm a member of the Family and Community Supports Unit at EEC. I am also a mom and a sister and a daughter and a colleague and a friend. But today, I am mostly super excited and enthusiastic for all of you because in my 28 years of service in state government, I have not heard the words family-centered focus. And this is so amazing and powerful, and it is a time and an opportunity for all of you and for all of us to ensure greater positive, successful outcomes for the children and families that we serve. How cool is that? And we're talking about a practice, and we're talking about change, a shift in the way we do things. And there is a really great guide, the Strengthening Partnerships, a framework for prenatal through young adulthood family engagement in Massachusetts, that is going to support all of us in doing this work. It was created by over 700 people in the state of Massachusetts about 8 years ago. Maybe some of you were on the coalition that helped to create this, practitioners, people from state agencies, and most importantly, parents, families. It was created by families to support us in reflecting on our work, because we all have the principles, respect and empathy and communication skills, but to reflect on our work based on some good concepts that have been tested out will help us to do better. Next slide, Hajai. Family engagement, this resource guide is for all of us because we want to create a culture in our organizations and with our partners that thrives on family engagement. And we acknowledge that family engagement is not just one person's responsibility, it's all of our responsibility to have this as our core value so that we're living and breathing and practicing authentic family engagement. Next slide. And we talked about our relationships, not only with families, but our relationships across community organizations are key, because going to what Kelly Meehan shared in the chat around, well, what do I do if we're not on the same page? Our relationship is going to support us in getting on the same page, being able to have conversations across our programs with each other to reflect on our practice and to do better. The other thing that it helps us with is also to know what resources exist, so that, as Bethany suggested, if a family doesn't get the outcome that they expected, we're able to provide them with other resources that will be important to their support and help them to feel not only supported, but heard, and give them resources that will support them as a family and their children as well. And so why would we do this? Well, we know why. We want stronger outcomes and successes for our children and families, but we also want to strengthen not only our families and ourselves, because this is a learning process. We learn from each other, but we're going to reduce high-risk behavior. We're actually going to strengthen our communities, because people will have access and knowledge to resources that will support them. They will have knowledge about advocating for their child and how to do that, and we will be connected. And I heard that word that we used in the beginning, love, that it's all about love. When we're connected, we have stronger relationships. It's love, and it's everyone's responsibility. So, the framework, how to use it. The framework is set up with some different components, some chapters to help you as you reflect in your work. And the framework is not used necessarily as a checklist. Do I do this? Do I do that? Do I do this? It's an opportunity to give you some supports so that you can reflect on your practice. Did I do this well? What can I do better? And it starts with guiding principles. The guiding principles are the music that will resonate throughout every element. The guiding principles are the what. And then the 4 elements are the how we translate the guiding principles, how we translate our work to effective family engagement practice. There's a section that focuses on transitions, because whenever a family is transitioning, it is an opportunity to engage with them. And then the final component of the framework is about building capacity within your organizations, within ourselves, to do authentic family engagement. And it's not a skill that we're necessarily born with. It's an awareness. It's a culture that we're creating. So this chapter will be really key in helping move our organizations forward. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hajai, who's going to share with you the music, the guiding principles. Thanks, Hajai.
Thank you, Flo. Just as an aside, if you're looking at the bottom of the slide, you'll see it says October 2023. We probably should put October through November. We know today is Friday, November 3rd, right? I'm right there, that's the 3rd. So we started this series of training on Monday, the 30th of October. So it's actually transitioned through that whole month. Well, not the whole month, but through the change of month from October to November. And thinking about what Flo had said around the slides with the why, the evidence that's in this booklet, everything that she and I are going to talk about in the next few moments are all from this 37-page booklet that, again, these hundreds of people came together to talk about and to research why it was important, what the social science actually says about parent engagement and all those great outcomes that we get when parents are involved. And Flo will come back and talk a little bit about how you do this. But I just want to tie together the why and the how a little bit before I give you like what are these principles, which are not going to be new to you, as either Bethany or Tyrese said in the beginning. These will be reminders to what you already know, to what you already do, and then we're bringing these back up as reminders for best practice. How can all of us be doing this better? But the idea I want to leave you with, or one of them, is that when your why is big enough, when you see this dad looking at his daughter and they're both in this state of familial ecstasy, this is the why. We want parents to be able to have these kind of connections with their kids on a regular basis, and for kids to be able to get these kind of connections from other caregivers in the community that love and nurture them. Love being that key phrase again, the key word, because that's what builds brain development. That's what makes healthy adults, is having these kind of serve and return interactions with grownups who care about them. This is at the core of everything that we do. And sometimes in the midst of the 67 emails that came in, overnight, oh my God, how can I do that? How can I support a family in this kind of interaction? That's what all this is about. So the 5 principles. The first one, I'm going to tie the first 2 together because they're a little similar. And the first guiding principle is that each family is unique and that all families represent diverse structures. There's diversity within families, and then within the many families that we serve, there's diversity within the families as they come together. So the family engagement includes genuine efforts to understand how each family is unique, because even if they're all, African American or Vietnamese American, or all immigrants from one country, or all from one part of your city, each family has unique beliefs and values and priorities and goals and aspirations, even if there are some of those elements that they share with other families in your community as well too. So I'm going to ask you to just think a little bit about this. You don't have to throw an answer in chat yet. I'm going to ask you to do that in just a moment. But in the families that you work with, what ways are they unique? And that's why I want to tie this into the second principle, which is around diversity. So this explains that diversity is expressed, uniqueness is expressed and experienced at multiple levels. And it's not limited to, but that does include a family's race, ethnicity, religion, culture, language. The family structure, is there, 2 parents, 1 parent, 2 parents of the same gender, like multi-generations of a family living in one home. Family structures look different. Are there 1 child or 5 children? Like that all is an element of diversity. Their cultures and specific situation, as we're seeing in chat. The age of the parents and the age of the children. That huge factor of socioeconomic status, like what's the financial resources that a family has available to them at any moment, and the educational level of a family. So those are some of the big categories. Right, and you're already getting to it in chat, so I'm just going to jump to the next, to the question around uniqueness and diversity. What are the ways a family can be diverse? Susan and Lisa, you already, thank you. You jumped into the chat before I even got the question out. So you were kind of intuitive in reading where we were going. Specific situations, a grandparent can be raising a grandchild. I have 2 adult children that did various forms of early education, including grandmother support. There was one of our grandmothers, my wife and I, one of our mothers was super involved in helping to raise our 2 children, and that was a huge help when my family was very young. Foster families, family composition, multi-generational families. There's we're doing a lot of work with families who are living in emergency assistance shelter now. So families who are coming from different countries, first generation children or first generation parents. Educational level, that families, go to a school where they graduated from high school. Was it a good school system that they, do they love books? Some families just like don't have any books in the house. And when we talk about early literacy, that's something that we have to help parents understand how they can share. Even if they don't love books a whole lot, they can still generate a love for books in their children. And that can be a great thing. Even a lot of us don't move. We've been sitting, how long have we been sitting in these chairs? Kids we know want to get up and move around a lot. Adults tend to be more sedentary. So how do we create a culture where families can get up and move around? Maybe folks were athletes earlier in their life, and so we want to think about movement and numbers and letters and colors and arts and all those ways that families can be diverse. So same sex, same gender parents, young parents, right? Trauma history. We're going to go into trauma in just a little bit. So I'm glad you put that in there. Let me give you the 3rd principle, so I can give this back to Flo. Let me also share with you a little bit of the future. Before we close here today, we're at 10:41 now. Flo's going to come back and talk about some more of the elements in this framework. Then we're going to ask you, all 196 people in the room, we're going to ask you to go into small breakout rooms. So I'm going to give you a little tidbit around that now, where if you don't have your camera on in the breakout room, we're going to ask you to turn your camera on and just chat with, 3 or 4 other people in your breakout room about these guiding principles, about customer service in general, about your work with young families, and not just young families, your work with all families, especially those who have young children, and how do we really do this better? So no, that's coming up in a few minutes. So please hang in for that, and please be as involved as possible when we do that. We're on the tail end of this training. You almost made it through. So hang in there with us a little bit more. We've said several times, this is all about love. My, 3 decades as a social worker, that has been the essence of what I bring to my work every day, and some days I do it better than others. So the guiding principle 3 is building a respectful, trusting relationship, a reciprocal relationship. And that is the shared responsibility of, I'm going to say, practitioners, those of us who are kind of paid to do this work, and then families, organizations, systems. And the interesting thing for me, I mentioned the zeitgeist, for me to be at EEC at this time, is that you can see the system is actually changing. This EEC system is becoming more family-centered, more human-centered, more relationship-centered. And for all of us who are in this meeting right now, this is a really exciting place to be. So let me ask you in the chat. I think this was one way the family could be diverse: a child with behavioral problems. That's huge. Moms living in a child mother housing, or maybe like a family shelter. But a child with behavioral problems, no matter what the other kind of cultural group they may be in, if there are 2 parents who have children who are both exhibiting really difficult behaviors, they're going to bond around that, because that's a big piece of culture. As somebody who had a child with special needs who's an adult now is doing really well, but it was a struggle with one of my kids for a long time, and we got supportive services for him, and that was really helpful. So how do you build trusting, respectful relationships with families? Somebody give me, and I'm looking just over at my other screen here, so I'm not ignoring you. I'm giving you my full attention. But what's another way or one way that you can build respectful relationships? Listen without judgment. Thank you. Positive communication. We could do 2 days on just this family engagement framework. And a lot of that would be around communication. And there's 2 parts to communication. There's sending information and receiving information. And we have to become experts at doing both of those. And for folks that have been in the field 20, 30 years, or maybe it's even like, 1 or 2 years, because you bring that new, fresh energy, right? It's about really being patient and, kind of sharing, your truth, what you have, and hearing the parent's truth. So listening, love, communication, empathy, not just listening, but being able to put yourself in that other person's place. That's huge. Each of you know a lot of this. We're going to talk a little bit about challenges to doing this in a moment before we do the breakouts. And that is where we'll have an opportunity to say, like, okay, we know all this stuff. Why don't we do this to the best of our ability every day? One more from Angela in the chat: offering kindness and not seeing the parent or child as a problem. That's awesome. We're going to come back to that. So families are their child's first and best advocate. How can families do that? Or what's one way that you've seen a family advocate for their child? I mentioned, my son, when he was in middle school, he was having a lot of like psychological challenges. Like he's in that, a lot of kids in the current generation are having a lot of depression and anxiety. We hear about mental health issues for children all the time, right? So we had to advocate for him. Not only were we helping him to get, therapy outside of school, but we had to advocate for him to get support that he needed in his classroom in middle school. So asking for those resources, that's great. Finding what's available. One thing, when we're going to talk about equity in a bit, is that I'm a social worker. His mom's an artist and a strong advocate and real persistent woman, and so we were a great team in advocating for our child. Not everybody has that skill set. So did my child probably receive more services than another child who was in that exact same situation, whose parents couldn't advocate for them as well? Unfortunately, probably so. So in our role as providers, we have to think about how we can do better for all families. And that's my goal as a social worker. We're gonna come back and talk about equity in just a moment. So I'm gonna pass this back. Guiding principle 5 is family engagement must be equitable. I'm going to pass it back to Flo, and then we're going to come back before we do our breakout and talk about equity again. So I won't ask this question now because I just want to give her the opportunity to talk about the core elements of the framework.
Awesome. Excellent. Thanks, Hajai. So you're going to find in the framework that the elements, the how, are set up in 4 different specific categories. And they are, you'll see these icons in the guide, in the framework, to support you as you reflect on your practice, and also to receive tips on how to do better on your practice. Next slide. It's important to know that the elements are the foundation, and each element builds on the one before. The music, the principles are ever present, and the elements are what you'll be doing, your practice. Acknowledging that every family is different, has different needs. As Hajai said, they're very unique. Leaving your assumptions at the door is really key. And so when we think about element 1, building positive relationships, we want to be intentional in this and know that trusting relationships just does not happen overnight. It's about being present and being there with the other person, being true to your word, having follow through. So Hajai had shared at another training, having follow through. If you say on your voicemail that you're going to get back to a family within the next day, but it takes you a week, then change your message. But also in building your relationships, owning if you have made a mistake or if you didn't follow through, because we are all human and we all have stuff that we need to check at the door. So when we're building relationships, we want to be authentic. We want to leave our stuff. I might have gotten out of bed on the wrong side and I'm not in a particularly good mood, but I'm going to put on that smile so that I can be there and engage authentically with the family or our community partner that I'm dialoguing with. And it's a two-way street. So let's just think about what other ways, and please put it in the chat, would you build positive relationships with the families you serve? And this is for everyone. And while there's so many of us here today, your comments will be helpful for all of us. Open communication, being available, showing empathy, I understand, being consistent in your communication. Listening requires practice, and it's okay. Don't judge. Don't judge. I'm going to take a moment on that one, right? No assumptions. When we were talking about unconditional positive regard, I have a very major hearing impairment. You would never know that about me. I have a cochlear implant, but it would be very easy if we were engaging and I didn't hear you to think, oh, she doesn't care, she's not present, or whatever. But we leave our assumptions, our judgments to the side because we may not have all of the information. Next slide, Hajai, and thank you everyone for your great comments. Promoting family well-being. When families are well, children are well, communities are well. And so this is a really critical element that supports us in our work, which is engaging with families, but if they have a specific need, being aware of resources that may exist so that we can support them in meeting those needs. Hajai mentioned the Coordinated Family and Community Engagement Grant. One of their purposes is to be aware and knowledgeable of the supports and resources that exist in a given community. So you don't have to be the expert in knowing where everything is in your region, but knowing where to go and who to contact to support you in these efforts so that you can better promote family well-being is key. Active listening, I see in the chat. So what are other ways that you can promote well-being with your families? And we'll put those in the chat as well. And it does take time to come on through. From our last question, answering the phone, being present, being there is the first step to building your relationship. So being aware of programs, following up, asking, how are you? Providing resources. Thank you. The next element is about promoting pathways for partnerships with families. And we've talked about how family engagement is a two-way street and your communication is reciprocal. Family engagement is something that is done with, it's a partnership. It's not done to families, but in order for that to happen, you need to have pathways. You need to create opportunities for families to engage with you. And so in the chat, someone said asking questions. Absolutely. Answering your phone. Giving surveys to families, but being present with them and not just doing to them, checking in, explaining, having feedback loops. In one of our past sessions, somebody said in the chat, I was one of those angry parents. It was because I wasn't heard. Opening up and creating that pathway, your effective consumer support and services is the two-way street. Hearing them, acknowledging them, having empathy. So our next question on the slide, how do you partner with families? Addressing them by their first name. Yes, we heard Tyrese, when she was engaging with everyone, acknowledge their name. Hajai was acknowledging people's names in the chat. And I'm going to put on my reading glasses because I wasn't doing that. And it was Genesis. And I hope I pronounced that correctly, Genesis. But exactly, people are people. We are both humans. We are together in this. Kristen said, make it personal. And again, we can correct. I just corrected. I was not practicing strong positive engagement. Bonnie said, ensure that they feel welcome. Thank you. Great ways to partner with families and many more. Many more in the chat. The last element is supporting child and youth development, learning, health, and well-being. Families know their children best. So sharing information opens the door, asking a family about their child. What does your child like to do? It opens that door, strengthening and building your relationship, and you're learning so much that is going to support you in being more effective in the services that you provide. And helping families understand about child development is key in this element as we're working to engage with families in an effective way. It also, when you're reflecting, it's okay if a family doesn't respond to an effort. Reflect on your practice and try another, because not every strategy is going to work with families. We're all unique and different. So our next question, thank you, Hajai, is how do you discuss child development with families? Bonnie, just on our last question, wrote, calm them down when they're angry, engage them in conversation. Breathe. Hajai is really great at reminding us to breathe. How do you discuss child development with families? Does anybody use humor as they're engaging with families? Someone in another presentation said that they provide them with the milestones for CDC, and now my brain is blanking because I've got to implement best practice, CDC, the Center for the Development of Children, and not use acronyms. ASQ, the Ages and Stages Questionnaire, relate their own experiences. Thank you, Brooke and Dottie. Now, Liz, be sensitive and put yourself in their shoes. Absolutely. There's lots of opportunities in many ways that we can discuss child development with families. But for now, I'm going to pass it back to Hajai. Thank you, everyone, for your chat, your comments, because they're helpful to us all as we work to strengthen our family engagement practices. But Hajai, let's talk about the challenges.
Let's talk about the challenges. It's so much fun. We wouldn't want to do this without talking about the challenges because they're real. And I'm going to actually pick up on one thing in chat that that Bonnie mentioned. Calm them down when they are angry. Now, as a social worker, as a dad, as a husband, as a friend, I've had a fair amount of experience with this. And so the question becomes like, when people are angry, and this has come up as a challenge, like not just like we talked about a child's behavior, but sometimes a parent's behavior, they're angry, they're upset. Sometimes maybe even your own child in the house or a spouse or a sibling or a friend. What helps to calm people down? It's not really pointing out like all the crap that they did wrong that got them in this funky situation in the first place. That generally doesn't help. What helps is this phrase, these 5 words that somebody described around good customer service earlier in the week. And those 5 words are calm, caring, competent, focused attention. Calm, caring, competent, focused attention. That's what we're talking about here. And the family engagement framework, good customer service, it all harkens back to those 5 words, which you can practice without a lot of extra time in your day. Being present in each conversation, in each interaction, is something that we can learn to do a little bit better. Not saying that it's easy, but there's a few things we want to do before we get you out of here at 11:30. And so let's jump into the challenge. And again, I'm going to actually put into chat so we're really clear what we're talking about. This is different than all those other wonderful abilities that we were talking about to engage parents. Why is it difficult? Like I think we're all on the same page here. We all agree this is probably a good thing for us to do. All this family engagement stuff, the core elements, the guiding principles, the listening, the empathy, the using people's first name, those things, all that's good stuff. Why is it hard to do those things in your job? All right. Many parents do not want to do their part and they blame the agency. I hear you. The prior experience a client may have had before, we're going to talk about that in a minute, Dominga. The trauma that people bring to your desk. Let's see, too many parents and only me. I love that. We've heard that a lot, Natalie, but that says it maybe best as we heard this week. So many parents, so little time. It's only me. Sometimes the resources are not there. Parents need stuff that's not there. And from the iPhone to everyone, we're going to land on this because that's like maybe the key. Time. Too much workload. There's just too many tasks to do. You want me to be calm, cool, collected, focused attention. Well, I got 47 parents, sitting, waiting for me. And it's really hard for me to do that when there's just so much stuff happening. Language barriers are another challenge. Cultural norms may be very different from yours. We will unpack some of those because we talked about we all grew up in a family that had a particular culture. And when you work with families from another culture, there's a little bit of ethnocentricity or narcissism that we all have, where even if our family culture, we know it had its warts and its like funky pieces, we tend to see other families' warts and funky pieces before we see our own. So again, being short-staffed, parents feeling embarrassed and having a difficult time asking for support. It may be part of their family culture that you don't ask for help. For a long time, I worked with dads, and that was one of the things. I still work with dads, but that was sort of my kind of primary role for a long time. And men, you may have experienced this in your life. In general, we have a hard time asking for help. So coming to a service like, the ones you all work in, we all work in, that's asking for help. That's hard for a lot of parents to do. And the iPhone with that really wonderful comment, brilliant comment was Vanessa. So thank you, Vanessa. And then, Amber, she nailed it as well. We fall into routine and we forget how important this stuff is. So, parents may not understand the process. We could lean into this a lot more. But I'm gonna highlight, that the cultures may be different, that we feel kind of uncomfortable with a family. The time may be really, limited. And so we feel stressed ourselves. And the behaviors may make, a parent or a child's behavior may make us feel like really uncomfortable. We just don't know what to do, or maybe it triggers our own trauma. Because we're all walking wounded in some way. So we're all walking around with our own stuff. And sometimes if a family stuff mirrors our stuff, we might bond with them. But sometimes if a family, stuff mirrors our stuff, we might be inclined to just like push them away because we're feeling a little triggered on our own. Let's talk about equity, trauma a bit, and then we'll start to bring this all home. So, there was a slide before about guiding principle 5 being that family engagement must be equitable. So what do we mean? I mean, we throw that around. Everybody's talking about DEI nowadays, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and lots of folks add the B, the belonging and inclusion. It can just, that's the I, sorry, but DEIB has become a thing now. So equity is the elimination of privileges, disparities, and disadvantage. That's a really hard thing to do because our society, United States culture, Commonwealth of Massachusetts culture is based on inequity. So when we're talking about doing family engagement, to make equitable family engagement, we must embrace diversity among children, youth, and families, and organizations need to make a clear and unequivocal commitment to equity. And when we talk about elimination of privileges, disparities, and disadvantages, we're talking about really helping to help families overcome trauma that they've experienced either in their own lifetime or in their ancestors' lifetime, which we now know through science that those traumas don't just live in psychology of the mind, they actually live in the DNA and the body as well. So, and what are the groups, when we're thinking about equity, we're really looking at folks that have been disadvantaged over, long periods of time. So we're looking at folks, people of color. We're looking at the people who are in the LGBTQ plus community. We're thinking about people who are differently abled. We're thinking about, folks that have experienced, like high, ACEs score, adverse childhood experiences. And you all know as well as I do that high ACEs scores are grouped around zip codes, that there's a gap, there's an equity achievement gap in our culture that's based on those groups of people and others that I didn't mention, just kind of coming together. Forgive me if you're in a group that's historically disenfranchised that I didn't mention right then and there, because again, we're just doing a couple of minutes on this. We want to lift up equity as being important component of the framework. And we're not going to do all this in one day or in one training. We're going to continue this conversation over many years because, again, the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times here at EEC and early childhood education in the field is very different now. You know, we're going to give you a short breakout. And then we're just gonna come back. You know what? I can't. I'm sorry. So we're just gonna change this now. We're gonna stay in this room because for me to like kind of walk you through the breakout, I was looking at this and there's like just enough time that we could kind of do that. But with 187 people, we would lose some folks. And then you'd go the whole magic to go into the Zoom room and come right back. I know not everybody is crazy about breakouts anyway, so let's stay in the big room and the 5 or 10 minutes where they're taking the breakout to come back and report out. Let's just do some report outs, and then I'm going to pass it back to Tyrese and maybe Bethany. I've only done this training 5 times this week, but they'll come back and talk a little bit to just like kind of close this up. And we will make sure that we get you out of here by 11:30. It's been a long morning. We appreciate your attention, your calm, focused. What are those 5 words? The calm, caring, competent, focused attention that you've given us. So we talked about the challenges, and we could spend some more time talking about the challenges as well too, but maybe we'll do that another day. What we wanted to think about somewhat is kind of addressing the question that was posed before the break about well, this isn't happening in all the places that I'm in now. Like I'm hearing conflicting reports from families about how well this is going. So we want to try and lift up the customer service principles that we talked about. And Bethany did a really good job on laying them out. There was one that that I kind of wanted to just lift up around the empathy, just understanding where families are coming from, putting yourself in their shoes a bit. So I'd love to hear anybody come off of mute now. You can share this in either chat, or if you raise your hand, if you just come off of mute, we can hear some other voices here. It would be great. Is anybody doing this in their practice now? So let's just take that first question for a couple of minutes. You all have given us, and I don't have a number on the number of chat messages, but it's got to be over 100. I've just been seeing them come in all day long, all morning long, let's say, right? About you understand empathy, you understand listening, you understand good communication. So let me ask somebody to come off mute and just describe empathy and listening to the family. So Rachel, you were in at 11:11. I'm going to ask you to also, Rachel Owens, if you could just come off chat and just tell us a little bit how, this is, okay, report out. Let me just put the questions back up. Like, how do you practice that with a family when there's all these other, sort of distractions, like people open your door and answer your questions when you're about to talk to 200 people? And you're on mute still, Rachel. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi,
everyone. So I work with our DCF contracts. So as you know, they can be somewhat difficult cases, but when I do talk to the parents, I really try to listen and show empathy. And you try to feel like where they're coming from. I think that is the best thing when you're listening to them. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes I have parents that call and they yell.
yeah.
But you have to let them vent, and you have to know where they're coming from. And I try not to say calm down or take deep breaths, because we all know that can actually accelerate them. So I just tried, are you okay? Are you safe at the end of the discussion? But I think just knowing that, knowing where they're coming from is the biggest thing, and having that empathy for them. And, and the way that your tone in the voice, that's a big deal with families too.
tone of voice and having empathy, tone of voice. These are really great examples I appreciate. And and I agree with you. Like when somebody's upset and you tell them to calm down, that hardly ever works. I learned that with my wife early in our marriage. It's just like not a good idea. So again, these are skills that can really help you in any area of your life. Thank you. So,
Hello?
Karen Buck, you said, I feel like I do this now. Please, come on, give us one example. If you're can come off mute, if you can come on camera. I can't see you now. I want to scroll through all 8 screens that I've got available, but if you speak, you'll come up.
Hi, yes. I work at the Y and I've been doing this for about 20 years. So I call them my families. I just really get to know my families. So they come to me for everything, like, where should I get an oil change? You know what I mean? It's kind of funny because I'm like part of their family now. They know if they need anything, even if it's a gallon of milk, I'm gonna run in the kitchen at the Y and grab it. So how I do that, I don't really know how to explain how I do that. I think it's just being approachable, checking in on them, answering them right away. If you let an email or a phone call go one day, they're like, oh, she doesn't want to talk to me. Oh, they just get a little upset. So I try and return all those. I know we're all busy. Everybody is busy, but that's what we got to do. I mean, we're part of the we have to be part of the community in order to help our families.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. 20 plus years doing this. And sometimes it is, you forget like how you do this because it becomes second nature. So we appreciate that. We'll get some other voices in here. Dominga, we'd love to hear what you have to say. Up and I don't know why you're not, are you on mute?
Hello?
I can't hear you. Okay, there you go.
Hello?
It's a headset.
So I come from a human services background. I was a family advocate for Head Start for 3 years. Then I transitioned here to Child Care Choices of Boston. I feel the foundation to a rapport you build with the family is very important. I try to treat each client with the most sincere. You have to be empathetic. You have to obtain demographics information because that's crucial given the treatment plan or anything that these families need. Even if it's not in your department, you're going to have to be able to provide them resources and services that is beneficial to the family. Um, I'm mostly like a old school type. I like to have smart goals for myself as a professional. So I like to take little steps in order to be able to follow up with each client, right? If I promise my client I'm gonna do my research on this, so I'm gonna follow up with you by the end of the day, I put like little sticky notes to remind myself, hey, and I like to note a lot of stuff. I case note a lot. It's in my nature of background. Prior to this profession, we case note every communication you have with clients. Um, but like I say, you have to have a human approach. We all are facing crisis in some aspects of our lives. It may not be social economics, it might be childcare, it might be food disparity. It's something after COVID, we're all dealing with something nationwide.
Yep.
And with fundings being cut, a lot of families are being limited to very, very needy services that they need within this inner city community. So we have to treat our clients in a way that we want to be treated ourselves. We have to be human. We have to be empathetic. We have to be a great listener. We have to have rapid response. We have to be, professionals that are caring because that's the nature that we have to move forward to if we're in this spectrum of profession. We have to help. We have to resource. We're the umbrella of everything that these clients need.
Dominga, thank you for that. The human-centered reminder and all those great examples of what we need to do, how you interact with families, and that everybody's bringing, whether it's, fear of homelessness or food insecurity or, whatever kind of other emotional insecurities people are coming to your, to your table, to your phone, to your email with, everybody's walking around with these wounds all the time. And I'm sure folks have heard this idea that when somebody's upset, somebody's yelling at you, they're not really upset at you. There's all this other stuff that they're upset about, and you giving them the opportunity to vent a little bit within, reason. We want you all to be safe as well. I mean, that's primary too. And maybe another time we can talk about how do we care for ourselves? Because I know we've had a busy week here at EEC, right? So how do you care for yourself as you're giving so much? And this is a kind of hypothetical question. I'm going to pass it back. We're 11:19, so I'm going to pass it back to Tyrese now. But maybe it's not hypothetical. Maybe I'll pass that question back to Tyrese, right? As Deputy Commissioner, helping us institute all these human-centered changes at the Department of Early Education and Care with all our vast provider network. Actually, Tyrese and I started the same day, November 7th last year. And again, I've been a social worker. We've both been working with families for a long time. But at EEC for just about a year. And the zeitgeist, I'm not kidding. There's a lot of changes happening here very quickly. And in addition to doing all that great support with families, and Kelly's saying kindness goes a long way. So you got to be kind to families, and you got to be kind to yourself. So Tyrese, I'm going to pass it back to you. If you want to address that, how do you take care of yourself with all the stuff on your plate?
Wow. So you're putting it on me. So I will, I'm going to lift something up that was said, a number of things. And the first word is like community, right? And so we have to see ourselves as communities, right? And how do I take care of myself? I take care of myself as being open, transparent, and honest with my community. And you guys are a part of my community. And so it's being open to say, there is a lot of changes that are happening. It is a culture and mindset shift, and it's going to be a long-term shift, and that is exhausting, right? We're talking differently. We're asking you to engage differently, and we still have the same amount of time in a day. And so it's recognizing that we have to take a minute and breathe. It takes less than 60 seconds to take a breath, to breathe. And if we're not well, right? If we're not well, then it's hard for us to be well and show up for our families and to show up for each other. Right? And so, Hajai, I'm always in that space. There's been a lot happening. I joined EEC, and the train was already moving, and I had to hop on that train and learn, right? All at the same time. Yes, I had worked directly with EEC as it related to childcare with Department of Transitional Families, right? With the families over there, but I came into a whole different aspect of the work. It was like, oh my gosh. And so I'm constantly reminding myself that the time that I have is the time that I have. It takes less than a minute for me to reset myself. If that means I'm 5 minutes late for a meeting, then I'm 5 minutes late for a meeting. But it also means that I show up, right? And I would not ask anything differently of myself than I would ask of any of you. And so we have to be able to take care of ourselves. The conversation today was intentionally grounded in the spirit of the work. And us being able to be transparent with you that this is hard. It is hard for us, right? The leaders of this work, we are new. And so we're actually all learning together. Right? I talked about partnership and collaboration. We are the community. And I think it was you, Karen, who said you consider the families, you said my families.
Mhm.
You said my families, and then Dominga, you said, we are the umbrella. And so what I'm saying to you is we are the umbrella and we are a community, and we have to think in that way. I'm not even, before we even get to the families, we as EEC, you at EEC and you as our partners, and then the families. And when you're a community and your family, you take care of each other, you extend positive regard, and we're going to give each other grace with accountability. I was reading your chat, and a lot of focus on like workload, and it's so, this needs time. I'm going to encourage you to think a little differently about the time it takes just to be present for a family. Being present does not take more time. Being present means taking a minute for yourself first, because Hajai just said, we have lots going on. You have no idea what's going on in someone's personal life, right? For us, right? But we still are working with families, and I'm still working with you, and we're still working, we have to show up. And so taking the time for yourself. So Hajai, I'm taking care of myself by taking the minute for myself. I actively do breathing before I speak. It's how I readjust myself. And then giving myself a minute to be present for you, and for you, it would be being present for your families and each other. Like, my hope is that you have somebody. We all need somebody or somebodies that we can take a minute with. And so I encourage you to do that. What I don't want anyone to do is to leave this session today and say, wow, they shared a lot around how strategies for engaging with families differently, strategies for engaging with each other. And that was a lot. It was good information, but to put into practice is hard. You're already doing it. You're already doing it. This is really just a refresher, and it's a refresher for all of us, right? It's just a refresher for all of us. So be encouraged and know that you're already doing this work, right? We're not asking you to do anything differently than you're already doing. What we're saying is we're supporting you differently in that work. And I'm going to say that again. We, EEC, are supporting you differently in doing this work. Our commitment is to do it different, is for EEC to show up differently. And showing up differently meaning having spaces that you can interact with us regularly and ask your questions, where you're not always just sending it through email, having the space to say, Tyrese, well, what about this? How do we improve our information gaps? And how can you help us do that? And so that's our commitment. Like, that's it. And I want you to take care of yourselves first. We have to take care of ourselves first. I'm going to put up a quote for 3 minutes, and then I'm going to just let you guys know what to look forward to in the upcoming weeks. I want to say thank you for joining and being engaged. You guys are super engaged in our chat. I'm going to share my screen again. Oh, all right, can folks see my screen?
Yes, with the other slides on the left, but looks good still.
It looks good. It's here. So my last words, or close to last words, is a quote from the famous Maya Angelou. And it reads, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. remember that as you're going out and continuing to do the work that you're doing with our families. We have another poll for you. We always like to check on, make sure we're doing a check-in in the beginning and then check-in as we leave. So if folks can scan the QR code with your phone or go to your web browser, let us know in one word how you're feeling now as we get ready to close. And then leave that up for a sec. Megan, can you drop the website, the URL in the chat? Thanks. So what's next? What's next? So many of you have already signed up. So thank you for signing up. In the upcoming weeks, we will we'll have next week, it kicks off our family journey training, which will be from November 7th to November 17th. And our family journey is where we're going to talk about all things waitlist, eligibility, authorization, reauthorizations, denials, terminations, and how do we work families through that family journey. And then we'll move to our provider experience and our module 3. The provider experiences, all things related to reimbursement, billing, and financial management. And then our last module is program integrity and our administrative procedures. So program integrity is, how do you get ready for an audit? What does that look like? What should you expect? And the administrative procedures are around PFML, and time off, as well as we'll talk about changes to contract agreements and voucher agreements. And then we're going to continue to have virtual office hours throughout all of our trainings to ensure, I'm going to stop sharing, to ensure that you have time to engage with us. And so after each week training, we'll have a office hours. The office hours for this session will be on Monday. I got it right, Megan? On Monday. So you can join us on Monday. Please sign up for office hours. And what we'll do is, the intent for the office hours are for you to bring direct questions to us, or if you had a thought that you didn't get to share here, you can bring it to the office hours. We will be posting the recording of today's session on Monday, along with the PowerPoint that was used for today's session. And we'll follow that sequence after every module. So the modules, the materials from the modules will not be posted until we conclude that module. We really want to ensure that folks come to the trainings so they can have the opportunity to ask their questions and hear directly from us. And as I already said, we'll ensure that there's open spaces for people to ask their questions. Thank you, Megan. So you can see it visually, what I just outlined. So we're closing out principles of engagement today. Office hours for principles of engagement is on Monday. All the other office hours for the other sessions will be every Friday.
And Tyrese, before we close, I just wanted to tell folks we put the hub for all the
Thank you.
CCFA changes in the childcare financial assistance changes in the chat for you, as well as the start of our parent-facing, our family-facing material. So there are some things out there that we're developing and getting ready. So I'll repaste them in there so you have them on the bottom.
All right, thank you. Megan, can I just take a look at the word cloud? How are folks feeling now that we're hopeful? That's great. Hopeful, motivated, excited, good, wonderful, close, happy, comfortable, growth, informed, love, superhero. Yes, yes, superhero. Relieved. Wow, relieved. I'm glad that we could relieve something for folks. Confident, tired. Yes, I'm with you on the tired. Changes, satisfied, and refreshed. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Megan, we can stop sharing. I just want to conclude and say thank you. I appreciate all the work that you do. For anyone that's coming to an in-person session, I look forward to getting to meet you in person next week. And for everyone else, I'll see you on a Zoom coming to you soon next week. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you.